Way back in the heyday of sound cinema, seeing musicals on screen was like magic. It's easy to see why. Being immersed in large-scale music numbers was like the ultimate spectacle. What's not to love? Flash forward to today, and you can only imagine how much advancements in film technique and technology must be taking musicals to levels previously unheard of. Just watch the trailer for Wicked and...
Where is the singing?
No, really, when I said you could only imagine what musicals must be like today, I meant it. Again, let's look at Wicked. In the entire trailer for one of the biggest movie musicals of all time and far and away the biggest Broadway adaptation, we never see Tony Award winner Cynthia Erivo or Grammy Award winner Ariana Grande sing or dance once. All of the trailer's music is played as background noise, so while we can hear the spectacle of the film's grandiose musicality, at no moment do we see it shine on screen. And as you probably know, this isn't where the trend starts. Wonka, Mean Girls, The Color Purple, all films released in the past year that, had you only seen their trailers, you may have never known they were musicals. What's up with that? Musicals used to be the biggest genre in Hollywood, and now we hardly acknowledge the whole selling point when a new one comes out. Well, there's an answer to this confusion, but not one that comes without anything to debate. Let's talk about it. Before we really dive into this, quick footnote. While I was in the middle of researching and writing this video, I found an article written by Harrison Richlin published to IndieWire literally earlier that day that goes in in-depth detail about exactly what I'm talking about in this video. So rather than ignore it, I want to acknowledge that here and say that if you're interested in reading more about this topic, that's a great place to look. I'll link it in the description. There will also be a couple of quotes from it throughout the video, but I thought it better to bring this up here, and I've tried to pivot my own analysis a little bit to bring something new to the table. That being out of the way, let's get into it. To first understand why these trailers are hiding their music, I think it's important to lay the groundwork. What exactly is it that they're failing to capture? I'm not talking about what is a musical. I know we all know the answer to that question. I'm talking about what makes them so special. See, I'm a huge fan of movie musicals. Two of my favorite movies in the world are The Young Girls of Rochefort and Cabaret, both musicals with different approaches to the genre, but ones that nevertheless capture in equal measure why the fusion of musical theater and cinema can be so enrapturing. It's just such a pure form of spectacle. In the same way that action films immerse us in the POV of an action hero, musicals immerse us in the song and dance fantasticism of their worlds, somehow grounding us in a world that feels both unreal and hyper-real, as the music emboldens emotions and beckons out our inner worlds. What is more cinematically captivating than becoming a part of a grandiose expression of love across distant worlds? What is more cinematically provocative than being immersed in Cabaret's sinister escapism while fascism creeps its way into the Kit Kat Club that you yourself have been captivated by? Musical numbers have the potential to bring unrivaled emotion to the screen when used well for cinematic spectacle. It's no wonder this was the genre that convinced the world that sound cinema wasn't a gimmick and that it was here to stay. Yet something has happened between then and now. Cinema has always had trends, but perhaps now more than ever it seems musicals are being shunned. And yet we keep making them, and we keep marketing them, and when you look at that, they can still make good money. But amidst all of that, we keep hiding them. Why? Something feels contradictory here. Something doesn't make sense. Richlin seems to agree, leading to his own prodding of this topic. He, however, has a theory on what's happening here. Most studios no longer have any institutional knowledge of what makes musicals so special, therefore undervaluing them at every opportunity. Richlin makes a fair argument. Ignorance, perhaps, is the culprit. And I don't think he's far off, but let's first bring up another side of this. Test scores. What first brought this whole discussion to the forefront of my mind was when, as I do every week because I'm a crazy person and it genuinely fascinates me, I was reading the Deadline weekly box office report, this time for Wonka's opening weekend, and author Anthony D'Alessandro had this to say of its performance. A great result for a musical after the genre's post-COVID funk. and the studio intentionally didn't sell Wonka as such in trailers. Why? Apparently, test audience focus groups generally hate musicals, and the only way to get people in the theater with one is to trick them. If they get in the door and wind up enjoying themselves, then business is solid for a studio on a musical. So there's our answer, right? It all boils down to test scores. Well, this does offer a fairly concrete answer as to why trailers for musicals have been hiding the musicals part, but it doesn't really get to the core of the issue here. Again, if audiences hate musicals, why make them? Why do some do well? Why do some do really well? Is there, per RICHLIN'S argument, a disconnect and ignorance? And when we take all of this into account, is it really the wisest move to market musicals without the music? To state the obvious, none of this really makes sense. And to stop beating around the bush for a moment, no, I don't think this is the wisest move. I may not have a master's in marketing, but it doesn't take an expert to see that the fundamental issue here is one of communication and misguided metrics. As Matt Singer pretty succinctly puts it for Screen Crush, it would seem there is a rather large disconnect between the people who make the movies and the people who market the movies that needs to be resolved. In other words, considering that musicals keep getting made, it's obvious that there is a proven audience for them and that the studios see these films as having profit potential. Just look at Wonka and Wicked, which made great money even after, in the case of Wonka, the secret got out. And that's not even mentioning the Disney musicals, which make no attempt at hiding, except for the new Mufasa, which follows the trend of using its musical numbers as background tracks in the trailers. But what about the failures? One could certainly argue that in recent cases like The Color Purple and Mean Girls, it was wise to hide the music, because when people saw the movies and everyone learned that they were musicals despite the marketing's best efforts, they dropped like a rock at the box office. Thus proving the test score is right? Wrong. While it's true that these films dropped bad, I'd argue against the fact that this justifies the marketing. If anything, those drops could have been a product of the marketing. When approaching the marketing strategy for a musical, you have two choices. You can market as broadly as humanly possible to an audience that reflects focus groups, or you can tailor your marketing to a slightly smaller but very dedicated crowd of musical lovers. On the surface, it might make more sense to go with the larger crowd, but the problem with that strategy is that, one, you're not going to convince a lot of them, and two, when you trick people into seeing a movie they were never going to like, your word of mouth suffers, and word of mouth is huge. There's an undeniable correlation between a high cinema score and good box office legs. But when the audience being polled is full of people who feel duped into watching a musical, that score is going to reflect the audience's distaste. This shows up in Mean Girls' case, coming in with a so-so B cinema score. The Color Purple dodged this, scoring an A, but I don't think many crowds were out there screaming for people to see the film in the places where it would have made a difference. I remember that when the film came out, despite it being a big player in the awards conversation that year, no one my age was seeing it or talking about it. Why? Because in trying to market to a mass audience and in hiding its musical grandiosity, it failed to appeal to people who I know would have enjoyed it because it's a big musical with a sweeping, impactful story. I wholly believe the marketing could have captured a large audience of musical lovers had it marketed itself as a musical. But it didn't get me in theaters because it hid. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who saw the trailers and thought, I can wait to see that on streaming. Championing the film's big song and dance numbers might have changed that. I think studios know this to some extent. Again, they keep making musicals for a reason. They know they can be big, but when you shoot yourself in the foot by marketing to the wrong audience, what do you expect to happen? Niche marketing can work. Longlegs and Terrifier 3 proved that much this year. Why can't musicals capture the same kind of genre audience that horror films do? Because marketing teams don't even try to market the films to an audience that might love them, or as RICHLIN'S suggests, market them in a way that might convince the viewer of the beautiful spectacle of a musical instead of seeming ashamed that it is one. Just because someone says they don't like something doesn't mean they won't show up for it, in the same way that liking something doesn't imply a firm sense of loyalty. Once we understand the situation along those terms, then the challenge becomes not tricking people into watching something they don't like, but rather creating an environment where having an open mind is rewarded. How are you supposed to get butts and seats if not even the people marketing the movie think it's worth seeing for what it is? You can also find examples proving that marketing to musical fans can work, and work well. Again, you have the Disney movies, but those are riding the backs of nostalgic IPs. What about original musicals? La La Land was huge, and it was huge because it embraced its music from the first seconds of its trailer, and people loved it. Let's not forget The Greatest Showman either, which had a genuinely insane run at the box office. Even on Netflix, they had Matilda the musical being marketed with the musical in its name, and props to them, it did pretty well. Now, back to Wicked. It's hard to imagine that marketing it as a musical would hurt the film. Pretty much everyone knows it's a musical, and while I did see the film, I would have been all the more excited if it was wearing its musical numbers on its sleeve, especially considering how much I ended up enjoying them. Neon gets that. Even with mixed reviews, I can't wait to see the end, and was strictly because it's a musical and is being marketed as such. Same goes for Paramount's Better Man, which I had very little interest in seeing until I saw a trailer before Wicked that sold me on its unabashedly grand musical spectacle. Think about how much more effective the Wicked marketing campaign would be if it highlighted Cynthia Erivo, one of the greatest voices of her generation, belting out Defying Gravity rather than relegating the song to background score. I agree with RICHLIN. So, all of this being said, I think we've answered our guiding question, but whether or not this marketing strategy is smart is more up in the air. People love musicals. I love musicals. The genre offers some of the most captivating cinema we've ever made, but because a vocal crowd finds them cringy, studios and marketing teams have helped foster a culture that sees musicals as something to be embarrassed by. The issue, per Singer, you're setting your own movies up for failure. If I was Hollywood, I'd consider maybe reevaluating what's going on here. Why keep producing films in a genre that you're going to shun with your marketing campaigns? Which is to say, please keep producing musicals, but change the way you're marketing them. I know I'm not the only one driven crazy by this, so let's course correct. Musicals have value. Instead of giving us reasons not to see them, maybe try embracing this history genre and breathing life into it. Maybe instead of offering up films with shame, try reclaiming the musical's pride. Thank you for watching this video. Please like or subscribe if you enjoyed it, and feel free to check out any of the works that I cited in this video. A lot of them are great reads, so if you are interested in this topic and want to learn more about it, I highly recommend going to the sources and checking them out. Thank you, and yeah.